Edward Harrison was born in October 1953 in a cramped terraced house in Manchester's Ancoats district, where the air carried the grit of post-war industry and the fading echoes of Britain's textile empire. His father, George, a tailor and RAF veteran, ran a small shop off Deansgate, mending suits for office workers while nursing a war-wounded limp. His mother, Margaret, stretched every shilling to feed Edward and his two older sisters, her hands raw from seamstress work. Life was simple: stews, bread, and dripping, rare treats of fish and chips. The radio was their entertainment. Television was a dream until the late 1950s. Manchester, once the heart of the Industrial Revolution, was a city of contrasts in the 1950s. The promise of the NHS and council housing clashed with lingering poverty and class divides. Edward, a wiry boy with sharp eyes, absorbed his father's mantra: "Knowledge breaks chains." He haunted the public library, devouring books on arithmetic and business, his mind alight with dreams of rising above the soot-stained streets. At 11, Edward passed the 11+ exam, earning a spot at a grammar school, a rare chance for a working-class lad. But at 15, with money tight, he left to apprentice in his father's shop. The 1960s were tough. Manchester's textile industry, which once spun half the world's cotton, was crumbling under competition from Asia. Mills closed, jobs vanished, and George adapted by focusing on bespoke tailoring. Edward learned to cut patterns and stitch hems, his hands calloused by 16. In 1971, George died of a heart attack at 52, leaving 18-year-old Edward the shop and a pile of debts. With his sisters married and gone, and his mother grieving, Edward took a loan from a building society to buy a second sewing machine. He worked 16-hour days, expanding into uniform alterations for local factories, inspired by tales of entrepreneurs like Alan Sugar, who started selling car aerials from a van. In 1978, at 25, Edward married Elizabeth Thompson, a cheerful teacher from Cheshire met at a dance hall. Her warmth steadied him, and she urged him to formalize his business as Harrison Textiles. Their first child, James, arrived that year, followed by Charlotte in 1981 and Oliver in 1985. The 1970s and 1980s were Edward's golden years. As Manchester's cotton mills shuttered, he pivoted to synthetic fabrics and ready-to-wear clothing, capitalizing on Britain's export market. He rented a factory in Salford, employing workers, many South Asian immigrants with textile expertise. By the 1990s, Harrison Textiles supplied Savile Row and exported to the U.S. Edward bought a Kensington townhouse and a Cotswolds cottage, sending James to Harrow, Charlotte to Cheltenham Ladies' College, and Oliver to a Swiss boarding school. Ski trips, lavish birthdays. He gave them everything, a repayment for his own lean childhood. Elizabeth's breast cancer diagnosis in 2003 hit hard. Her death in 2005 left Edward unmoored. She had been the family's heart, mediating the children's squabbles. Without her, James drifted into high-stakes finance in the city, borrowing for risky ventures. Charlotte married into a wealthy Surrey family, her visits rare. Oliver chased tech startups, each funded by Edward's wallet. The Thatcher era's long hours and the 2008 financial crisis tested Edward's resilience, but his business endured. By 2020, at 67, chest pains and breathlessness revealed heart failure. Reduce stress, doctors said. The pandemic hit his factories hard, and he reached out to his children for emotional support. James was swamped with trades. Charlotte cited lockdown restrictions. Oliver was off-grid in Cornwall. In 2023, pneumonia landed Edward in the ICU at St. Mary's Hospital, London. Tubes snaked into his veins, an oxygen mask his lifeline. The beep of monitors haunted him. He texted his children, "I'm in hospital." "It's serious. Please come," James replied days later. "Hectic at work, Dad, sending thoughts." Charlotte, "Kids have colds." "We'll try." Oliver, silence. Edward's heart ached more than his body. He thought of Elizabeth, how she would have rallied them. Instead, Sarah, a nurse in her 30s with a gentle smile, became his anchor. A widow raising 2 children on her nurse's wage, she stayed beyond shifts, sneaking him custard and sharing stories of her struggles. Thomas Wright, Edward's lawyer and friend since their Manchester school days, visited daily, reminiscing about football in the park. "You need to rethink your will," Thomas urged. "Your kids aren't here." Edward resisted at first, but weeks of solitude hardened his resolve. Discharged after a month, he returned to his Kensington townhouse, a 5-story relic of happier times, now silent. He hired Sarah part-time as a home nurse. She cooked stews, monitored his meds, and listened to his tales. Thomas reorganized finances. Edward journaled, chronicling his life and his children's betrayal. One spring evening, as he sat in his garden watching cherry blossoms, James called. "Dad heard you were ill. Feeling better?" The concern was hollow. Charlotte and Oliver followed, their calls dripping with false warmth. Gossip from cousins confirmed. Edward's near death had them eyeing his $400 million fortune, factories, properties, offshore accounts. Edward smiled grimly. They saw him as a frail cash machine. He'd proved them wrong. He invited them for an Easter reunion. They arrived, James from Canary Wharf, Charlotte from Surrey, Oliver from Bristol. The townhouse buzzed with forced cheer. James brought vintage whiskey, Charlotte a scarf, Oliver a gadget, tokens of greed. Over roast lamb, they pushed for future plans. "Dad, you should retire," James said. "Let us manage the business." Charlotte. "Yes, divide things fairly." Oliver. "I've got startup ideas." Edward nodded, feigning agreement, while plotting with Thomas. He rewrote his will. The Elizabeth Foundation for Disadvantaged Children, schools, clinics, job training, got 60% of his wealth. Factories donated but professionally managed, profits funding programs. 20% went to Sarah, a trust for her clinic and her children's education. 20% to his grandchildren, locked until 25 with stipulations for university or charity work. For his children, modest sums and gifts with a twist. He played the doting father, seeking their advice on asset division, noting their greed. James wanted the Cotswolds estate, Charlotte the jewelry, Oliver cash. Meanwhile, Edward regained strength, walks in Hyde Park, physio with Sarah's guidance. He volunteered at shelters, finding purpose. Months later, at Thomas's office in Lincoln's Inn, the family gathered. Envelopes were handed out, faces fell as they read. "This is outrageous!" James roared. "Charity? A nurse gets more?" Charlotte sobbed. "Dad, how could you?" Oliver. "I'll sue." Thomas explained, ironclad, witnessed, notarized in Switzerland. Edward spoke calmly. "You left me to die alone. This is my legacy, not your entitlement." Second envelopes held keys to modest Croydon flats, 2-bedroom, functional. "Your start," Edward said. They stormed out. Lawsuits followed. James's legal battle drained his savings, courts unmoved by evidence of neglect, unanswered texts, absent visits. Charlotte's marriage faltered. She took a teaching job. Oliver's startups collapsed. He worked retail. Edward thrived. The foundation opened schools, Sarah's clinic saved lives. Grandchildren visited, learning values. In his final years, Edward found peace in Manchester's regenerated heart, museums celebrating its industrial past. His revenge not ruin,